Okay.
Thanks to Dr. Anindya, he has brought us together.
Yes, yes,
Sure.
in fact, thank you for having.
It is always a pleasure to have two good friends together. Okay. So
Thank
shall
you.
we start?
Yes,
Yes, please.
yes, absolutely, sure.
So good afternoon, everybody. I welcome you for today's interesting panel discussion. Before we get into this, best wishes of World IP Day. Today we are celebrating World IP Day like many other groups all over the globe. Every April 26, uh, throughout the globe, IP Day is celebrated mainly to encourage innovation and creativity. And IP days are usually associated with the theme. So this year's theme focuses on IP and youth innovating for a better future. So we thought we can have a very, very related and contextual topic for the youth, which deals with the career in IP. Now, when we talk about youth, statistics says that there's about 1.8 billion young people. Young means under 24 in the world today. And 90% of them are from developing countries. And this proportion is going to increase. So the youth indeed is an incredible and a large untapped source of ingenuity, creativity, which can help us to move into a more sustainable footing. And regarding the careers in IP, both for lawyers and non-lawyers, I have with me two very eminent resource persons. Let me introduce them briefly. I'm not getting into the details, that would consume a lot of time. We have Dr. Shakeel Bhatti. Shakeel Bhatti is the WIPO officer working on substantive matters relating to IP and genetic resources. He is currently responsible for all substantive matters relating to IP and genetic resources at Program 4 in WIPO. He joined WIPO in 1996 and had played several roles. He was instrumental in establishing the Global IP Issue Program. He represented WIPO in several forums like CBD, FAO, UNEP, WHO, WTO, and many more. He was the first executive secretary to the International Treaty of Plant Genetic Resource for Food and Agriculture at FAO. Before joining WIPO, Dr. Bhatti was at Duke University for his research, and he has taught in several universities all over the globe, including Austria, Belgium, India, Japan, and Sweden, and has several publications and books to his credit. Our second panelist today is Dr. Raj Hirwani. Dr. Hirwani is an Emeritus Professor at AcSIR at CSIR Urdeb. He's an adjunct professor at the DS Center of Entrepreneurship at IIT Mumbai and a visiting professor at IIT Harvard. Dr. Hirwani brings about more than 40 years of experience in techno-commercial research and industry. He holds a PhD from Technology Management from IIT Mumbai, and his work primarily focuses on IP management, academics, both public-funded R&D institutes. He was the head of IP director of CSIR until recently, and also the director of CSIR Urdeb at Pune. And he is credited to have pioneered patent analytics services in the country. And before that, he had a long tenure as the head of the Research and Planning and Business Division at NCL Pune. With this brief introduction, I would like to start off today's panel discussion, and I thank both of you for being available today, making time for our discussions, and helping the youth today on the focus of IP. Now, let me start with Dr. Bhatti. Dr. Bhatti, So you have been practicing IP in different forums, in different ways, and you have always felt that it's an exciting area for attorneys. Do you see that it's still exciting? Is it increasing? How do you see this practice of IP among the attorneys going nowadays?
Yes, well, thank you, Dr. Sirkar, and first of all, thank you and NALSAR for organizing this event today, which is most I think pertinent and topical, and it's a pleasure to join you and Dr. Raj Hirwani on this occasion. And regarding, in fact, your question, Dr. Sirkar, the by all means, I would say, since the days when the early days when we started working on intellectual property, which was around the time when the TRIPS agreement was being adopted in the context of the establishment of the WTO. At that time, IPRs had really basically gone through an effect of getting globalized, truly, fully globalized in the context of the WTO. But I believe today, again, IP is becoming even more central and even more dynamic to a certain extent because of the innovation changes and the changing innovation pathways that we are seeing. Everything that's often summarized as digital transformation, the fourth industrial revolution, and the emergence of and convergence of transformative technologies. These trends that we are witnessing in the, as if we could say so, post-TRIPS era, I think are making IP an even more exciting and even more dynamic field. And I believe, especially for the young people in today's disciplines that relate to IP, I believe it's more promising and central than it ever was in the global knowledge economy.
Okay, thank you, sir. But having focused on looking at the practice of IP from the attorney side, Dr. Hirwani, IP has always been looked upon as a hidden career for the STEM graduates. Now, how true is this? You have spent a lot of time in both scientific and technology community in several roles. So how do you think, is it true that it's how much of a hidden career is there for STEM graduates?
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar, first of all, inviting me along with Dr. Bhatti to this occasion. To understand this opportunity, let me a little bit elaborate on what Dr. Bhatti talked about post-industrialized society. See, at the beginning of the 19th century, ushered an industrial revolution that demolished the 8,000 years paradigm of wealth creation which was based on agriculture. It significantly altered in several ways the application of manual energy by steam engine. And we are 100 years ago, at the beginning of the 19th century, we had electrical energy, which transformed the existing industries and from the new industries. But today, at the beginning of the 21st century, another revolution is underway. Advances in new technologies, microelectronics, computers, telecommunication, information technology, biotechnology are interacting with each other and creating a new, different economic world. We have biotechnology coming with new plants, new living systems, microelectronics, then lasers. So we are now seeing emergence of new knowledge-based economy. Internet has shrunk the world to the desktop. So global economy has become possible, which feeds and thrives on this man-made brain power industries. The factors of the wealth creation, even of the industrial revolution era, are no longer valid. Knowledge is the new factor of wealth creation. And IP is a foundation on which knowledge-based economy is built. Now, no one else can create that solid foundation than the creators of those knowledge. That is the STM graduates, because they understand the brick and mortar of these new technologies. So therefore, because that foundation is always hidden, nobody sees that, we are not able to see that opportunity.
Very, very wonderfully said, Dr. Hirwani. And I guess, the hidden part becomes more and more apparent, and more youth take interest in this, and we get more meaningful contributions from them in the days to come. Now, Dr. Bhatti, when you're talking about youth and we're looking at a situation when youth should get into this field or look at IP as a career, so do you think there is a definite skill set required for today's youth to make it big in this domain?
Yes, Dr. Sikar, I believe definitely that today's youth would be able to enter this field with a set of key skills probably that might be significant in the years to come. And as Dr. Hirwani just very, very beautifully pointed out, we have really moved towards a fully globalized and knowledge-driven economy. And in that context, especially the skills regarding ICTs are central now also even to the exercise of IP rights in the digital environment. So I think on the one hand, combination of legal skills and ICT know-how would be essential. It is the brick and mortar of the new knowledge economy, as Dr. Hirwani said, and also as that digital environment will be further expanding and going into a next phase of development with the arrival of Internet of Things, the IoT, and the increasingly widespread use of machine learning. As that happens, more and more, I think we are seeing legal standards interacting with the setting of technical standards and technological standards. And more and more, therefore, the exercise of really integrated comprehensive IP strategies might involve a consideration of both legal and technical standards applying to a particular field of technology. And so as that happens, it might be also worth for students and youth today to focus and develop skills on both sides, the legal as well as the technical and technological, beginning with the IT field and then whichever field of technology that a student might be specializing in.
So if I understand today, the IP should probably become a joint venture between science and technology, legal studies, and also management. Okay. And all put together, that's how you make it really prosper. Now, having said that, Dr. Hirwani, you are actually a blend of all these three. You have been a scientist, you have been in the practice of IP, and you've managed big projects, you've managed big funds, and so that's a blend, Do you see that this blending of legal studies with the technology, especially for the STEM students, would be beneficial? Now that, in India, we have the new education policy, which talks about, similar blendings?
Yes. See, the excitement of cutting-edge research, learning about new technologies, helping new inventions become products, etc., attracts the STEM graduates to the field of intellectual property. But to succeed in this career, candidates must understand the implications of discovery research, what makes it different from past advances, and its practical applications, and communicate these nonsense in a succinct way. So having a strong STEM background is a kind of prerequisite, but having a diploma or a degree in patent law is highly desirable. Because organizations, particularly law firms or IP departments, hire STEM or PhDs as technology specialists. And that become a kind of a gateway to this field. Technical specialists advise patent agents or patent lawyers with research and writing tasks. They perform background research for a patent, investigate competing patents, and figure out ways to work around them. They also sometimes write patent applications. And STEM graduates who successfully pass through the patent agent can write, file, prosecute patent applications before the patent office. See, they cannot render legal opinions or practice law, but the patent lawyers specialize in either prosecution, writing, filing, or litigation, defending against lawsuits. While it is possible to remain as a patent agent, even a technology or even a technology specialist, a law degree is needed for career advancement and salary increases, which today young people look for. So I personally feel a legal background is preferable after your STEM degree.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So basically, the best model would be exposure to IP law for all STEM graduates to start and explore the field, and then probably take up advanced studies for those who are keen to pursue it.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, when we look at both, whether it's lawyers or non-lawyers, whether they're coming from the technology background, now there are several areas where one can get into, because the domain is quite big and vast. So, Dr. Bhatti, do you visualize there are any gaps and opportunities which today's youth can probably focus on?
Um, yes, in fact, Dr. Sagar, I believe that there are certainly some areas where gaps still exist that are emerging, that might even broaden before they are filled. And I think those gaps have to do with the key transformative technologies that we are witnessing, which will also transform, probably to some extent, the practice of IP, both on the legal side as well as on the management side. And so those those technologies, of course, are on the one hand machine learning, AI, as well as new digital trust technologies, distributed ledgers, blockchain, etc. That are and I would also mention also the classical technological protection measures that have been used in the past in areas like copyright in the digital environment, that are, however, being also expanded. Those types of transformative technologies will definitely also affect the practice of IP, and there, both in terms of the legal side, legal strategy, as well as in terms of practical management of IP portfolios. I think it will be advantageous for students to probably develop skills to be able to fill the gaps of skill sets that are needed, namely having legal and technical background with the skill to actually utilize these new tools increasingly in the building and the management of IP portfolios.
No, thank you, Dr. Bhatti. But Dr. Hirwani, would you like to add something in this aspect, where, specifically in the Indian scenario, some of the gaps which the youth can focus on?
See, there's a point where I always talk about pattern analytics. Because pattern analytics enables you to identify those gaps. And pattern analytics involves analysis, doing landscaping, identifying those gaps, planning your research programs to fill those gaps. It enables you to do technology monitoring, technology competition analysis, patent portfolio management, technological studies. Even when we talk about patentability, freedom to operate, validity, all these are part of technological studies. And patent analytics also helps you to do HR management, because you identify prolific inventors when you get into new technology or new businesses. And patent analytics is today a subset of data analytics. And data analytics is a very contemporary subject. Only thing is we are applying into a technical field.
Continuing that, Dr. Hirwani, see, you have been very, very pivotal in popularizing patent informatics in India. And your annual events, I was fortunate to attend a couple of them, of the Patent Informatics Society, and you played a very, very leading role in this. Now, do you think this itself can be a career for if somebody wants to get into this?
Yes, it is very much, because you are not only part of the IP community as such, you are a part of overall a business community. You are a part of an R&D community. You have a space in R&D department. You have a space in a corporate planning department. You have even a space in market research department when you look at competition. You have an opportunity to work with patent attorneys, patent lawyers, patent agents, HR departments. So it is a career by itself. Patent analyst is an official position. Patent engineer is an official position in companies. Today, even in pharma industry or in automobile industry in India today, all these STEM graduates are basically involved in patent analytic activities, looking at non-infringing routes, FTOs, patentability studies, competitive intelligence. So, bright career awaits them. Actually, there's a shortage of engineers who do patent analytics activities today in the country.
So nice to know that, Dr. Hirwani. And then we are really thankful for all your efforts, which you have been taking for years to popularize patent informatics in our part of the globe. Now, Dr. Bhatti, you have had a lot of experience in tech transfer, licensing, due diligence, valuation of technology. Okay. And there is the way the economy is moving now, there's an increased or a growing interest in these activities, whether it's licensing, technology transfer, and to do both of them, you need to have a proper due diligence and evaluation system. And from your vast experience in this, what would be your advice to the youth in this regard?
Yes, I think, thank you, Dr. Sirkar. In fact, definitely, as you rightly say, there is very much an increasing need for skills and expertise in the areas of, let's say, licensing and technology transfer. And probably there are two clusters in this of skill sets that in what you just mentioned. One is licensing, technology transfer, and then due diligence and valuation. So maybe looking at that part, the first part initially, certainly I think when it comes to technology transfer and licensing models, I think in today's world we are in an ever more integrated, networked environment. It is becoming, innovation pathways are becoming ever more collaborative. Innovation ecosystems are becoming ever more integrated. So more than ever, there is really the need for being able to facilitate technology transfer also in new forms. And that means with also different models of openness, from open innovation models to more classical direct proprietary licensing models. And these changes in tech transfer practices and licensing practices are then also being further supplemented and affected by new tools arising. As we mentioned earlier, digital trust technologies, distributed ledgers, and so on are all transforming how know-how is transferred, how technology is transferred. And finally, the technology and the know-how and the innovation themselves are changing, in that today we see, for example, in the fields of the life sciences, we see increasingly incremental innovation, cumulative innovation, very data-driven innovation that is less centralized around key breakthrough inventions that become the subject of patent, but that also involve a wider set of intangibles, like data sets, different versions of those data sets, algorithms, know-how related to the use of those data and patented inventions. So as the innovation subject matter itself changes, that is being transferred, and the technology changes in nature that is being transferred, again, the tech transfer and licensing models which facilitate that equally transform. And so in that sense, I think especially tech transfer and licensing practices are an area where there is a lot of dynamic evolution, and where youth in today's IP world might beneficially focus on. And then the second cluster of IP issues that you rightly mentioned are quite important, of course, are all those that have to do with IP valuation and due diligence. And here too, with this trend that I was mentioning earlier, where patents, of course, remain to be absolutely central, but they are also more and more being complemented with other IP assets, with other intangible assets. And these mixed and integrated portfolios are also becoming the subject of IP valuation, so that when investors are looking, for example, into investing in a startup, they will be looking at the IP portfolio, and so IP valuation becomes very critical, but it's no longer focused exclusively on the patent portfolio. It will also be looking at with a more comprehensive lens at other elements like brands, data, etc. So here too, IP valuation techniques become quite important. They themselves are evolving, and of course, that to touch upon the final item that you mentioned, that also requires due diligence practices to be well in place. So it's very critical that companies have those skills, including from the young generation in place right from the outset. So simply to very much underline and confirm what you rightly said, that licensing, tech transfer, IP valuation are quite central, I believe, in the future.
Oh, thank you, sir. See, if we really look at the evolution of business over a long period, there was a time when the tendency was to build. And then gradually there was a debate, build versus buy. Okay, whether you want to build it yourself or is it available for buy. I believe, gradually we have reached a stage where it is not build versus buy anymore. It is more of build versus licensing. And having said that, probably, your explanation, your thoughts on this make this much more rigidity in today's world. Now, my next thing to Dr. Hirwani, see, you have pioneered a lot of research. Okay? And still, when we compare research in IP with other fields, say science, technology, medicine, engineering, whatever, the IP research, specifically in India, eh, is pretty low. And the number of publications which come out in this field, in the domain of IP, is comparatively lower than you compare with any other field. And why do this is happening, and how can we can really improve it?
You see, till the formation of WTO in 1995, in India, we never paid serious attention to IP as an instrument of wealth creation and development. It was first time IP was linked to trade and economy. So there was neither a history nor a base of practice to have a data set to do enough research and draw some meaningful conclusions. Even industry took quite a bit of time to get warmed up to invest in IP. There was also much less demand for researchers and academicians in the field. We had practitioners, but not the academicians. People like you are very exception, who are PhD in life sciences and also PhD in IP, but you are more of a practitioner and then you became an academician. But I'm saying people like you are very exception. But today with the establishment of IP chairs, funding of research, the demand has now grown. And new institutions like IITs and law universities have departments, have research funding, faculty positions. So we see the trend changing. Even at CSR ODIP is a recognized center for research in IP. And I'm happy to inform you, last year we had 6 PhDs who passed out and covered the different facets of IP, right from pharma industry, software industry, and other facets. So it is changing, and you will see more and more research coming out and publications.
That's so wonderful to hear that, the role UDIP has played all over the years. Because on a lighter note, I'm just making a comment here that, it is often said that you can always start a course, make a syllabus, but finding a teacher for IP still becomes sometimes difficult in India. And so,
yes, that is where the practitioners have to contribute,
I'm sure, going forward, there will be more people coming in. And thank you for the kind words for me. And then going back to you, Dr. Bhatti, see, there are several roles, a youth can think of if he's planning for a career in IP. He can look at a corporate in-house role or, a law firm, whether he joins a law firm or opens his own law firm. He can become an examiner in the patent office. or the trademark office or any of the IP offices. He can take up consulting, or maybe teach the newer generation by joining academics. So these are the various things the youth today has in hand before moving forward. So what kind of advice do you have for them, and what are the factors probably they should be looking at before selecting which area they should be, going forward?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sakar. In fact, I think that there are definitely these different pathways that you have described, which youth today could consider when wanting to develop their future work in IP. And one thing perhaps for them to also keep in mind is that legal practice itself is changing. The legal industry is changing. The big law firms that provide extensive IP counsel for large companies as well are themselves in a process of transformation. There is a very interesting report that was issued not too long ago by INTA. It's called the IP law firm of the future, and it describes a number of interesting trends that are being observed, and more and more large practices like that are becoming themselves, in a way, federated accumulations of different skill sets and different sub-practices. So it might be worthwhile still to consider the large law firms. At the same time, there are, like you mentioned, also the increasingly the possibility of directly going into patent analytics, as Dr. Hirwani has, of course, developed for many years, but also risk management, IP strategy development in this advisory capacity. And often when that is especially coming from a STEM background, complemented with an IP legal background, that can be quite useful for numerous innovators and companies in terms of developing competitive intelligence, patent landscaping, freedom to operate analyses, all these types of products that really need to be developed. So there are different pathways leading into that field, but I would think it is good to keep in mind that there is a transformation of the legal industry, so to speak, itself in the IPR field. So students might very well consider also shifting between these different subsectors. And I think a prime example, of course, is your own experience, having worked in leading enterprises in different fields of technology, and then having provided direct legal expertise in terms of advisory, and then also having begun to teach the young generation. So I think these are things that are not mutually exclusive. On the contrary, I think there is a lot to be learned and of knowledge and know-how to be transferred from one of these practice domains to the other. And certainly the most effective is to have different experiences from these different domains brought together.
Thank you, and thanks mainly for pointing out a very important and a critical factor, that the practice of law, the practice of IP is changing. We'll come back to that point, but before that, maybe I'll ask, take the view of Dr. Hirwani. See, when we are looking at these kind of various role in-house law firms and all, We have drafting, prosecution, opposition and litigation, which are popular outlets, popular practice areas. So are there any other opportunities for STEM graduates within the current IP ecosystem?
You see, the general impression is that IP is either a technical issue or a legal issue, depending on which side of the table you are sitting. People tend to forget that IP is a business asset. So the ability to manage that asset takes you to a business domain. Industry requires professionals who have ability to evaluate IP, whether it is technically commercially viable. Remember, what is patentable is not necessarily profitable.
Very true.
And venture capitalists and other investors putting money into new venture want to know, will your technology sustain over a period of time? Financial institutions want to know, will your IP have any techno-legal challenges before they accept IP asset as a collateral. They want to do technology evaluation. Now, research and technology institutions need technology transfer professionals who can make business case of IP and do the licensing deals. There are also independent technology transfer agencies who require IP valorization experts. I call this thing as a 3P game, patents to products to profits. Now, this game has many actors, and each of these players require IP professionals with the same background. And this is other than you being a patent examiner or even working in patent analytics field or building software tools for IP analysis, etc. So the vast opportunities exist in different verticals.
Thank you, Dr. Hirwani. I think we should go back to the previous point. That's very, very critical, where we talked about that the practice of IP is changing, the practice of law is changing, and this is a question to both of you basically. See, with the enormous development we are having in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the amount of data which is coming in, do you think this is really going to affect the domain? And the practitioners, in what way? I mean, Dr. Bhatti, you can start. I would like to get opinion from both of you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sakari. In fact, certainly it seems that the impact of machine learning and AI will be felt increasingly in the way in which IP is also practiced. And there are multiple trends or ways of impact, so to speak, that seem to gradually be taking shape. One, of course, is the much debated question, can AI-related, AI-generated inventions actually become patentable inventions where the inventor or the AI algorithm or mechanism is named as the inventor or assignee, and that is one sort of immediate ongoing discussion that is being felt. It would probably also then impact in terms of how it would probably impact patent practice on the one hand, if significant changes are introduced there. Some are beginning to happen. Another, however, is more the use also of AI-generated sub-patentable innovation. So increasingly, for example, in personalized medicine or in other fields, for example, in life sciences, there is a use of innovation that is beginning to become more precision innovation. So precision plant breeding, personalized medicine, as I was mentioning, and so on. That's innovation which relies on very large data sets to customize what would previously be delivered through a single patented invention, more and more as a kind of continuous flow of precision innovation, almost like a service. So whereas before there would have been a single GM crop that might have been patented, several inventions might have been patented as a part of that. Today there is more and more of a continuous kind of genome editing or genetic service that is being provided to the farmer to produce specifically for the next season or the following year, specifically for that microclimate with specifically the local migrating pests, et cetera, the type of genetics, the type of plant variety that would be needed. And so just as an illustration, as that happens in different domains, there's more and more involvement of big data sets, more and more involvement of also machine learning. And that itself is transforming the practice of IP and going towards, as I was mentioning earlier, more integrated IP asset portfolios rather than a few key patents. And as that is changing, also the use of AI and machine learning on another level in terms of actually the delivery of legal services is equally beginning to take shape. So on all these levels, there is a considerable amount of transformation that's occurring through the impact of AI and machine learning. And definitely it's a evolution that will only accelerate over time.
Thank you. There has been a lot of debate about the patent ownership or inventorship of AI. It was the AI inventor, which was later named as Dabus. It was rejected first in Europe, the European Patent Office, then few other countries, and finally the patent got accepted in South Africa, primarily because they don't have a substantive examination system. But there are a lot of challenges in that area. Now, in the same line, Dr. Hirwani, see, a part of the paralegal job is already taken over by AI and machine learning. So, are there threats among the practitioners or the future employees that there is going to be, part of the job, part of the work functions will be no more existing, and it will be algorithms and machines doing those?
Yes, that is happening. If I talk about IP AI systems for data analysis, that is already happening. A lot of things which you manually do, read and analyze, have been taken over by the machines. So
Okay.
jobs will become much higher value added. The lower end will get eliminated. But we must understand IP very often is contextual. These tools do not give you results in the particular context. So highly educated people, STEM graduates, which can add value, particularly technology value, in the context of a science, technology, business, will always be required. They will not be substituted. So IP professional need to move up on the higher value chain. That is the message from all these developments.
Oh, that's really exciting to know that we are possibly going to move up higher up in the value chain. And although some of our workload may be handled by different automated systems. Now, my next query is also, to both of you. Maybe, do you suggest any change in the ecosystem which may increase or attract more youth in this IB domain? I mean, what's your take, Dr. Hirwani?
Dr. Bhatti, would you like to take it first?
As you would prefer, sure. Essentially, well, absolutely. I believe it is quite important also for youth to take a very active and maybe more active role and engagement with IP. The World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, is actually doing a lot to try to engage youth more and more in the IP field. For example, this this World IP Day of 2022 of this year is an example where WIPO had decided, and our Director General, Dr. Darren Tang, had decided to really put an emphasis on youth in the field of IP. And several measures can and are being actually taken. For example, WIPO has a IP Youth Ambassadors program. There is Young Experts program in WIPO as well, all specifically focused on trying to engage youth in the field of IP globally, and to also make the field of IP more accessible to youth in the areas of, in all different areas: environment, health, communications, creativity, and the creative industries, as well as, of course, scientific and technical research. So the idea is really to bring youth as much as possible into the IP field as change makers, and as the future generation of IP leaders who will, and teachers in the future, who will hopefully witness great strides in this field and will shape the future of IP. So very much, I believe there's an effort and an important effort to engage youth more in intellectual property.
See, in India, the government has taken some positive steps under the startup program, where IP-based startups are receiving support, including fast tracking of patent prosecution, hackathons, and open innovation movement in attracting youth to generate IP. But more needs to be done to fund deep tech startups for a longer period, as industry is unwilling to take risks there. At the same time, we need to sensitize the youth today and make them respect the IP of others. What happens, I'm sorry to say that we teach IP at institutions of higher learning, and on the same campus, you have photocopy shops which blatantly copy textbooks. The students watch pirated movies, use pirated software, and so on. We justify all these actions in the name of poor students. There are ways of handling this situation by way of cheaper students editions, multiple copies in the libraries, book banks, and so on. As a society, as a nation, we encourage reverse engineering and applaud and reward it because it is being first time in India. And nothing wrong against reverse engineering because you learn by doing it. But after 75 years of independence, let us raise the bar and start rewarding what is first time in the world. Today's youth, when he participates in the development game, he makes an investment, therefore has a vested interest in preventing that investment. So when you create this kind of ecosystem, he will himself demand for a protection and will get interested in IP. So if you take these steps, I think we'll move on that path.
That's so gratifying to know, Dr. Hirwani. We're getting a couple of questions which are live because it's a live program. We may not be able to take all of them. I'll read out one question. How do you use IPR to make profit? Do you see any change happening in that, or are there any shift in the last 5-10 years? Would anybody like to comment on this? How do you use IPR to make profit? And are there any change, major shift in the last 5-10 years?
See, if you look at the number of protections, number of litigations which are taking place, and number of favorable judgments which IP holders have received, that gives you an indication that people are looking IP as a business asset and making profit. That is the reason they want to exclude others and litigate. Number of cases, either patent cases, trademark cases, copyright cases, under each IP right, we have seen.
Okay. That's a significant and a noticeable change. And probably we're reaching closing time. One last question is that, see, when we look, since Dr. Hirwani were talking about startups, we've noticed that when a startup, most of the time that the founders are too busy in handling so many things that IP loses its true priority or potential. And do you agree with that? And what can we do to make it better?
Yes, perhaps if I may add, I certainly would agree very much with that, and believe that it's quite important for startups to really pay priority attention to their IP strategy and their IP model that they plan to develop and apply as an integral part of their overall business model that they are seeking to develop. And for that, actually, WIPO WIPO does offer a number of specific tools like guides or toolkits, also for startups, that can be used simply to ask the key questions and the right questions very early on about developing IP as an inherent part of any business plan of a new startup. And the technology transfer program in WIPO, as well as the WIPO Academy, have different resources available for that, and I would refer also the person asking the question to those resources.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So before we really end up today, any parting remarks from both of you?
Today's youth, I would like to suggest, if they have interest in science and technology and really don't want to be on the bench, but are excited by the developments, then they can surely consider IP as a career. Because conducting research in a particular field by finding and studying scientific literature, patterns, technical reports, and other related references, as well as analytical skills which they acquire while studying, they can remain in touch with the subject. And this field requires constantly keeping in touch with emerging technologies, changing laws. So you are always a student and constantly learning. So if you can add oral written communication skills and enjoy interacting with the people, then this is a field for you. Grow, remain in touch with your science, technology, see what is going on in industry. But only thing is, don't compare yourself with some of your contemporary in IT field, because then you start wondering that they are getting much higher salaries, etc. You need to have passion and remain networked with the community, join professional associations, programs, which will offer you a lot of opportunities in network. Thank you.
And Dr. Bhatti, any statement you would like to say to close up?
Yes, happily. In fact, I also would simply like to underscore the importance of youth engaging early in the IP field. And really, I would commend you and NALSAR for having organized this event today, just simply to also further facilitate and accelerate that engagement. I would like to share with all the youth who are present that WIPO is, as I mentioned, conducting several initiatives and efforts to create opportunities for youth, to engage youth more and early on in the IP field. And there is a youth corner on the WIPO website that maps out some of those initiatives and also some resources that are particularly designed for young people entering the field. And also there are initiatives like the Young Experts Program for those among the youth who have already begun to focus on IP, who have already engaged to continue that path and that process. And for both of those, I would refer you to the WIPO website, and there is a special set of pages, especially because of this year's World IP Day regarding IP and youth, and there is a permanent area for youth as well. And we will be adding constantly new material and new opportunities there for young people in the field of IP. And so that will also, as Dr. Hirwani said, allow you to also network globally with others who are interested in the field.
Thank you very much. Before I really close it, I would really like to thank both of you for sparing your time and really, your statements, your thoughts, this thought sharing was very, very helpful and meaningful. And I'm sure lots of youth is going to benefit and look up to IP as a career. I also thank DPIIT and NALSAR University for helping me to conduct this program. And I should thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Faisal Mustafa, and respected Registrar Professor Balkrishna Reddy for their constant support and encouragement. My team for putting all this together. So thank you all for being together. And lastly, once again, best wishes of World IP Day. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you too for organizing and conducting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Good evening.